Hi and welcome. We're so happy you're joining us today. Getting your data into one place, using your data to make operating decisions, and optimizing your inputs are the pillars of the FieldView platform. We hope this season becomes your best season, and we want you to find opportunities for using your harvest data for next year's crop plans, as well as get ready for harvest by reviewing our pre-harvest checklist today. As a reminder, previous webinars are all hosted at climatefieldview.ca/webinars. And they include topics such as setting up your virtual farm, scripting, scouting and satellite imagery, as well as conducting fungicide trials.
Andrew and I are excited to be here today with you so we can help you get ready for this season's harvest. We want you to uncover any great new opportunities and highlight opportunities that you have. We want you to use your data and use FieldView tools to make it easier for you. We want you to save time and make money. Our team is on standby. They're ready to answer any questions that you have live. You can type in the chat box and we'll be ready to help you out.
So today we have special guest with us, Dale Cowan. Dale is the Agronomy Strategy Manager and Senior Agronomist with AGRIS Co-op here in Southwestern Ontario. Dale, welcome.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, Dale, we appreciate you joining us here today. For our viewers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and your company?
Yeah, so as the title says, I'm the senior agronomist. So I spend a lot of my time with our customer-facing staff, some 37 people that I work with every day to deliver on our digital ag strategy and our agronomy programs and offer support and direction with all those staff members on a daily, ongoing basis.
Great. Dale, can you tell us a little bit, how's the growing season? Update some of our viewers who may not be in Southwestern Ontario. This season has been a bit unusual, as I think we can say. We see a little bit of every season, but can you share a little bit about what's happened here in Southwestern Ontario?
Well, I think you can tell by my gray hair, I've been around a little while. So I would have to say that we're probably off to the best start I've ever seen in the last 25 years of a spring season. We've just had ideal spring planting conditions. We always have a few little hiccups along the way with some weather extremes, but they don't last very long. So one thing I've noticed is, every acre's got a crop on it. There's no missing acres. There's no wet holes. There's no areas with just missing crop. It's just probably the best start we've ever seen to a spring season on all crops.
Certainly, we've seen some frost take hold here, where there was some late frost in Western Canada this year. There was some late frost here in Ontario. Have you had any assessments of what that maybe has played into some of the crops you've seen out in your area?
Yeah, well, certainly we've had our frost events, but they usually have come before there's been any major crop growth. Now, there's always some isolated areas. Just last week, there were some isolated areas that had some extreme frost, but it's not a widespread. Now, if you're the farmer with frost damage, it's pretty significant, so I don't want to downplay it. But on a general geographic term, we've gotten away with minimal frost damage.
Yeah, good. How does digital tools play a role in your day-to-day and maybe with some of your staff? What are you using? How do you use them with your customers?
Well, we've invested in a whole suite of digital ag strategy tools, but what we like most about FieldView is it's a seamless sharing of data between us and our customers and customers and us, and it's just this idea that we can have access to when things were planted, what variety was put in which field, on what date, and some of the other activities. So it really, on a pre-call plan basis, when you're going out to observe crops, you got all that detailed information at your hand. Like, you don't have to waste time asking somebody where the variety was, what date did you plant it, what you put on it for herbicide. So it's all that stuff is immediately accessible, and it's in a mobile environment, and it just saves so much time and just gets us into doing what we're supposed to do in the field as quickly as possible.
Yeah, great point. Dale, one of the things we're going to talk about is, combines are going to get rolling here in Southwestern Ontario in not too long, actually, with the winter wheat crop. Yield maps are a big part of starting to do something with your data, take a lot of learnings out of it. How do you use yield maps working with your customers? And can you comment at all in terms of, how we start with that yield map and then where it takes us maybe going into next season?
Well, there's a couple aspects to it. First of all, just having a very quick view of just how the crop performed in the field. It doesn't always tell you why it's performed differently in different areas in the field, but that variability is with us, and it's the foundational piece of precision agriculture. So having that yield data distribution is the first step. Secondly, if there's learning opportunities have been set up ahead of time, like you said earlier, different fungicide trials, different rates of fertilizer, all those learning opportunities really come to light very quickly, and you can calculate return on investments for some of the different practices that were tried. And in our particular case, with our nutrient management program, crop removal is a big component. And so having the yield maps, we can do an actual crop removal calculation fits very well with our 4R nutrient stewardship approach to managing nutrients on farm.
Okay, yeah, great. Does it impact your soil sample strategy at all? Whether you do grid, whether you do zone, how frequently you want to do that soil sampling per field as well?
Yeah, certainly grid sampling's been where we all kind of started from, but as we move forward, you need other layers of information, and certainly the yield map is a critical component of creating management zones of similar productivity. And sometimes you augment that with some of the satellite imagery in season, and we like to use multiple years of yield data and imagery to kind of put together those management zones that are similar, the same size and shape year over year, and they don't change much. And once you have that stability, you have some confidence to go ahead and start creating that management unit that guides soil sampling and also guides your fertilizer and your seeding rates and everything else that you want to do on a variable basis. Definitely important.
So after harvest, we're obviously looking at hybrid and varietal decisions. One of the strengths of FieldView is obviously the ability to make every pass a trial. We still have some opportunities in corn and soybeans for creating trials as well. Any tips for ensuring there's enough data to base 2022 crop planning decisions off of on-farm trials, such as the need to replicate, how often we should conduct some of these trials? Any tips for any of our growers out there for looking at conducting those trials and then analyzing it?
Yeah, so certainly my experience has been that let's look at one thing at a time, right? If we're gonna look at fungicides, let's look at fungicide in replicated strips, and it's so easy to do with technology. Do every other pass with a fungicide and come back in with your guidance system with the check or whatever the treatment is. But don't also layer in a nitrogen rate trial on top of that too, because then you got too many variables to analyze. So let's always like to keep it simple to start. We can get complex as we get confident moving forward. But yeah, it's just replicated trials, because if you only have one strip, you never know if it was your best one or your worst one. So replicated strips help give you that confidence in your data set that you're truly looking at a treatment effect and just not a random variability due to landscape.
I appreciate those comments, Dale, and I agree with you 100%. You've went over so many things here, and just some that I wouldn't mind diving a little bit deeper in. Think about the growers that are maybe using their data for the first time. You and your team of 37 customer-facing staff are obviously very far advanced and down the journey of collecting data and using that data, using those yield maps as report cards at the end of the year, and trying to find out what the questions were. You talk about replicating trials. Tell me more about that. Tell me, what you would base it on. So you're saying replicate the trial 3 times, and then you would take that information, and then that would help you out with 2022. And would you completely change what you're doing to try to replicate what you did in 21, if that's the way it worked out? Just help us think a little bit more methodically on that, and what you would tell some of our newer users that are collecting data, please.
Yeah, sure. All those excellent points. So I have 40 years experience. I like to say it's 1 year at a time. So any 1 year's worth of data, you're going to have variabilities from environment and some of the other management aspects. So you're never really 100%. So we always say start small. So pick a couple of your field, maybe pick your best field and your worst field, do your replicated strips. I recommend at least 3 replications spread across the field, just to take into account natural variability in the field, and measure that result. And if it was positive and it's something you want to continue doing, scale it up next year, maybe add a couple more fields and see if it still is consistent in its performance, and just keep scaling up as you gain confidence. And sometimes you have to have the confidence that it worked one year and didn't work the next year. So it's, you know, it's either the best thing you've ever done or something else you've tried kind of concept. So you have to take your time. I think you need a couple years under your belt of different growing seasons to see if a particular product or a technique is actually moving the ball forward.
Yeah, good point. Environmental factors play such a large role. And, you know, with that comes anything from insects to weather, right? Disease comes in there. So, so many different factors and moving pieces. I think we're completely aligned with it. Just because something works in the field, even if it is a replicated situation 1 year, maybe it's not something we adopt on all of our acres. But like you say, as we gain confidence and keep on growing in that. So appreciate that.
Well, that's great. Well, Dale, really want to thank you for sharing some of this insight with our viewers here today. You know, 40 years experience doesn't come easy. Like you say, 1 year at a time. And we appreciate you sharing some of that insight here with us today. So many thanks. And yeah, let's hope we get a few timely rains here along the way. And this season is our next best crop. So
well, thank you, gentlemen. Very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Dale. Well, that was great. I really appreciate listening to Dale and Andrew. It really sounds like you guys have a pretty optimistic spring, you know, and going into early summer going on. You know, it's great when there's optimism in the air. Here in Western Canada, you know, we are needing some rain. We're getting into a pretty dry spot. Insects have been an issue in a lot of crops. But, you know, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're using field health imaging and how I would use field health imaging in the fall. And, you know, it's so neat because I got farmers that call me up and say, this is how I'm using FieldView, and this is how I'm using satellite imaging. This is how I'm using your scouting. Every week, it seems like either sales reps or agronomists or farmers are talking to us on different ways that they're using it. So there's two things that I wanted to show with field health imaging on how people that are using it. And I think it's really quite unique. And I wanted to share. So here we are, we're in the full app. So the FieldView full app, it's the one with the yellow F and the black emblem around it. And this is the landing page that we would have when this is the landing page we would have when we're in the iPad. You can do this from your phone as well. And I'm going to get Andrew just to go into fields. And here I have a demo field that I wanted to share with you folks. And this demo field is from 2018. And before I get into the whole story behind that and what's going on there and how the farmers had used it, if we scroll to find maybe a little bit later into the fall, maybe some August imagery, we'll start to see these areas in the field. And this is kind of like a uniformity thing. So let's go like, you know, maybe August 11th or August 21st, it doesn't matter. So we can see these areas in the field where there's some consistency and some flow to it. And remember, these scouting images, we're taking the highest vegetation and we're painting it dark green, and the lowest, and we're painting it red. So here we've got a bit of a corner pivot going on. So we're gonna treat that bottom left corner a lot differently. But I think about crops when we're going out to stage them, if we're maybe desiccating, or if we're swathing. You know, I think about canola. A lot of people are straight cutting canola, and there are still a lot of people that swath it as well, especially in our northern regions. They need it to get it to dry down. So what they'll do is they'll want to swath at 60 or 70% seed color change, and you know, it'll be the same thing as thinking about it as a desiccant. Now, what my advice to people is pull up your field health imagery. Look to find those consistent areas in the field. You got to know where the majority of your yield is, and that's where you want to make those decisions on where to go. So where that pin is in the top right corner, that probably wouldn't be a good representation of the majority of the field. I wouldn't want to be doing my recommendation on whether I should be swathing that day or spraying a desiccant that day from only taking samples in that area. I'd probably go down to you know, the areas that it's green. It's that second tier of green or the dark green. And that would give me a really good feel. And remember, if you have your location services turned on, which are those top 3 buttons in the top right corner. If you click on those, you click your location services, and a dot will follow you all the way through. So just show your current location is all you'd have to do, and then you'd be able to find those areas in the field and take those. And then take it a step further. Put the notes in when you drop a pin. Drop a pin and say, and then you have a date stamp, so you know that on, let's say, August 22nd, you scouted this field and it's only at 20% seed color change if it was a canola crop, perhaps. So this is how I would use it in the fall for scouting. And you can always use it, also use it for kind of prioritizing and trying to see, you know, did that first seeded crop, is it going to be the first one that I harvest? Or is it going to be a little bit later because maybe it took a little bit longer to come out of the ground? It was stressed with wind, or it was stressed with insects, or perhaps even just a little bit of drought. And you know, I always like to put it on the vegetation mode now. And if you take a look at vegetation, it'll give you a really good idea of what that field looks like. So here we can see it really mature, and it starts to mature at the beginning of August, and then, you know, it starts to defoliate, ripen, and this is what we'll naturally see through the crop. So where that second pin is, that we have in the middle of the screen almost, that's probably going to give us a really good idea of when we want to be getting ready to either desiccate or swath that crop, getting ready for it. So
Troy, just a reminder for our users again, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the scouting and vegetation maps, just quickly?
Yeah, you bet. Scouting is basically just highlighting the areas with the big differences. A lot of times people think that it always equates to yield, and it isn't a percentage. It isn't like you'll be getting 20% more yield or 20% less yield. There could be a very small variability in that. But once we skip over into vegetation, that's more of a true value. That's like an NDVI image. We call it a climate crop index. And basically we use our own science and our own algorithms to use this to almost better predict year-end yield. So it's a way for farmers to be able to go out and compare, let's say 2018 wheat to 2021 wheat, you know, and then you can look at those field health imaging side by side. You can look at maturity, maybe even the complete biomass. So, and you can compare fields from one field to another field and just compare those differences. So so one thing that I thought was quite unique when I first started down my FieldView journey in 2017, there was a farmer in the fall of 2018 that came up to us and said, and I don't know if everybody remembers this, it's one of those falls to forget. We had a really kind of marginally dry spring, and then season got a little bit wetter, but the fall, it just kept on raining and snowing, and it was atrocious. It was very hard for our customers to get their crops off. So what this farmer did is they pulled up their field health imaging with FieldView, and they clicked on the scouting image. And what they did is they looked over the field and they started, I'll get you to go on to scouting images and even into like September 6th, Andrew. And what they did was they went into the field, into these darker green areas in the top left corner, and they started harvesting. And they were at like 20% moisture. So, you know, and this was wheat, and they knew that's wet. That's definitely too moist to be able to handle for them and their operation. So then they pulled up these field health imaging, and they thought, okay, well, there's the other areas of the field that I can maybe start to harvest. So what they did is they found some of the areas that were lighter green, and I think they actually used the September 10th. This one is a little bit pixelated, and we've talked about that before in the past, this image. But if we look at September 10th, you can kind of see those flows a little bit more. And what the combine operator did, she said she went into the field and she found the areas that were that kind of yellowy or really light green. So kind of, if you see the 5 bars on the side, it would be the middle bar down. Now the red again is that dry land area, so we're not concerned about that. But right where that pin is right there, they kept their location services on, and they were able to harvest all of those areas, and they kept and it was straight cutting. So, you know, it's obviously not ideal, but they knew the rain and the snow was coming. It was in the forecast, and they were able to take off over a third of their field in this situation. And they were able to get it off at, I have 13-14% moisture. And the neat thing about it is they got #1 for all of that crop. And then the snow came, the moisture came. It was over a week and a half before they were able to get in and get the rest of the field. And the rest of the field all went #3, and they were able to get it down to 16.5% moisture. So still, you know, quite wet situation. They had to definitely deal with that crop, but they were able to, you know, prioritize and get a lot of the area done. And I know this isn't something that we're going to want to do on every field, but there are going to be those situations. You know, like we heard from Dale, every year is a little bit different, and we all know that we're in agriculture. But if we can find those certain situations, maybe it might be a tip or a trick that I just wanted to pass on to you folks.
Well, that's great, Troy, and I love it when, you know, we're using the features for unexpected circumstances, right? That we've got an opportunity to be more efficient. We've got an opportunity to use more data that's coming to us to be able to influence some of those decisions and have a direct impact on the bottom line in that case, like you say. So that's a fabulous example.
I know a lot of folks out there have moisture and yield monitors, but they don't have the GPS maybe inside their cab. So we can definitely talk to our equipment manufacturer. We can talk to those folks, and they'll help us get set up. You know, there's other options out there that we have. We have Trimble. A lot of people will go down that route. We have compatibility with it. I invite anybody to go on our Climate FieldView website and do it, or even call our support line. We'd be more than willing to help you out. There's a couple of new ones that'll be coming out in any day now, and they might even be like in the next week here, where we're going to have compatibility with. And one is local to Saskatchewan. It's Farm TRX. And basically what it is it's infrared monitors. And I think you have a couple of holes that you put in your clean grain elevator, you hook it up, and it sends this information to your phone. Now we're able to take that. We have a great relationship with them. And those folks, it's a very reasonable price. Some of the equipment, like the old gleaners, the old Case 2188s, like some of the stuff that they're able to collect data on is incredible. So I would invite anybody, if they're looking for an affordable option, or if they're just looking for what their options are, that would be some. Andrew, you must have a couple of favorites or a couple that you folks are using out there.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I always say to talk to your dealer, your equipment dealer, right? You know, Yield Sense from Precision Planting is a common one in my area. You know, John Deere, Trimble, Case, all have their aftermarket options as well. And so I think, you know, certainly work with your dealer and at the same point, reach out to the FieldView resources or any of our contacts, and we can match up compatibility with that, because it is really important information when you want to start getting into precision agriculture, start making data-driven decisions. It really does start with a yield map. And so I always advise customers that might be one of the best investments you make is getting that yield monitor.
Yeah. So thanks for that little bit of a bunny trail that we went down. But for those of you folks that are collecting data at time of harvest in your combines, we just wanted to give you folks a few quick tips and tricks. Here's a nice live demo of what it's going to look like. We see when we're connected to the drive, when it's blue, when it's solid blue, we're going to see everything on the left illuminated green. Everything's going to be coming in, data's going to be coming in. We see that lag in from where the combine is to where it's actually producing the data. That's very common. We're going to see that everywhere. It's yeah. And the neat thing about it, this is where farmers really like it, is they can do that trial that they had. You know, if they had a hybrid trial like this situation, or a seeding rate trial, they get that information live. And I know a lot of folks out there are making their seed decisions, or agronomists are advising on them and trying to get a feel for what's going on in their area. Nothing better than harvesting that trial and being able to have that information live. That live data capture is so key.
Yeah, and you know, I have a number of customers that will have a yield monitor, and then they'll be having this as an added display, so that as soon as they hit that high yield environment, oh, what happened there? Do I need to go back and see where my fungicide trial was? Do I need to see where that nitrogen trial was? Was it a change in hybrid within the field? Was I running a script and I want to have an idea of what the different populations were doing? Having that instantaneous analysis is really, really valuable. So I was going to say, Troy, shall we maybe talk a little bit about a pre-harvest checklist, getting ready to get our combine connected and ready for FieldView? It's probably been 9 months in some cases for a lot of customers.
Yeah, you bet. Let's get set up, kind of go through the list. And here we're in the CAB app. So this is the one where all the work gets done, right? And a big part would be is setting up equipment. That's what we would want to do, is set up our equipment to make sure that we have everything in place. And yeah, I think Andrew will add a new piece of equipment here for us.
Yep, you bet. So before we do anything, we want to make sure that our equipment is up to date and set up. Maybe we've changed over a combine. Maybe we've changed over a header. We want to make sure our header that is no longer on our farm is out. Same with our older combines, and make sure they're all up to speed. So if I go down here to, say, my S670, say I upgraded this one to an S680 this year, I'm going to remove that combine, and I'm going to go add new equipment. And I'm going to select combine. You'll also notice that we do have silage harvesters. They're currently in beta, which means some things are just still getting finalized, but we've got several customers that are using them to bring in silage harvester data as well. So know that that's an option as well.
Lots of custom silage operators out here, and I'm sure there's lots in your area too. These folks are often running the new equipment, the stuff where a lot of this stuff is just plug and play. So if you have a drive and you have an iPad and you want them to record that information, it's probably just a little bit of a conversation and negotiation. It's so easy to set them up. It's as easy as it's going to be for this combine that we're about to show you.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to select the combine make. In this case, I'm going to select John Deere. I'm going to go S series, and we'll select S680, and I'm going to enter this as my S680 JD. Done. Next. Okay, so it says I've successfully added a new combine. Now it's necessary to enter the GPS offsets and confirm additional combine settings. To edit this information at any time in the future, just use the setup button to the right of each equipment. So the first thing that's going to come up is our GPS offsets. So this is really important because FieldView is modeling the harvest data as it comes with a geospatial reference. So as a result, if for whatever reason there may be some overlaps or there may be some data that maybe we don't feel is aligning right, it could be related to the GPS offset. So always good to ensure that we've got these measurements and they're all in check. So the first thing often do, Kate, what is the height from the GPS beacon down to the ground? Let's make sure we get that height, which is C there. A, you can see is what is the offset on the GPS from the axle point. So let's take a measurement to that as well. And then is it centered? And if it's not centered, say it's offset left, we can then offset X number of inches to the offset left or to the offset right. In many cases, we know they are centered, and we've actually pre-populated the GPS references here that would come from the factory. But again, I always say trust but verify. We always want to ensure that we've got everything as it is on our own farms.
Yeah, if you ever see something coming in a little bit wonky or your yield maps aren't coming in quite the way you want to. This is the place that you want to go. It's either GPS offsets or some of the settings and adjusting GPS location, which we're going through now. So
exactly. So next we'll go to heads. So if I go to add new head, there's an opportunity here to select either row crop or platform. In this case, I can have an 8-row combine. It's defaulted to the current height at 100. But if you'll note here, there's a question mark and it says max harvesting height. Max harvesting height is the threshold that determines whether the combine head is lifted or lowered. The combine will stop mapping and accumulating acres anytime head height is above max harvesting height. So again, a very important piece of the puzzle. We know that there is a max harvesting height, and that typically when we get on our headlands or we're driving down the road, that it is lifted above max harvesting height and therefore stops mapping. One of the things we like to do is press the set button, and when we're connected, we say lift head to raise position and tap next, and then it calibrates that head height. Currently it's disabled, but we can also set it here. So say my max harvesting height was 70%, I can input that there. So make sure that you pay attention and have those inputs in correctly. So we are getting that data into FieldView the way we want to see it. And then again, we need some measurements here. So we want to know where is the axle to the cutting edge of the head. So let's take that measurement. And then what is the row spacing? So let's say I was on 20-inch rows instead of 30. That's where I would put that. And then is the head offset if it isn't centered on that machine?
Yeah, just a couple of things to highlight that that are a little bit unique to us is swathing. So if you have a swather and it's a 40-foot swather, but you're just using your pickup header, you would set it for 40 feet. You would go that width of that swather, and that's where the head type is as well, right? Like Andrew touched on that, it's platform. But then the rows and sections auto-populates to 32. And now that's the highest number that we have in there that we can get in there. So think about it like this. If you had a 32-foot platform header, you would be collecting data on every foot. So if you have a 40-foot header, it's almost every foot. It's like 1.3 feet or something like that you'd be collecting data on. And then if you have like those corners that you go around, it would start to snip that data off when it starts to overlap that. So that's that. I always say max that out, keep that at 32, because that'll just keep that data a little bit tighter and cleaned up.
Yeah, exactly. So all the principles here are very similar. And so that's how you would set up both types of heads. Okay. Next, we're going to go down this list. We're going to go into settings. And Troy, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the settings?
So shared swath on and off. This is we're going to want to use this when we're connected to data. So if you're live streaming your information and you have multiple combines in the field. So you'll be able to know exactly where people went. Nothing will get left in the back corner. If sometimes you have 3 or 4 combines in the field and maybe something gets missed. All of this stuff you should see those maps come in live. Another thing would be the automatic swath sensitivity. We always put that at the lowest sensitivity. And as far as the moisture source and the moisture lags.
Yeah, so I think on the moisture source, so you can see there's a few options here. It will default in most cases. If we're on a yield sensor and monitor, then we're going to select precision planting for that. But in most cases, it should default and we don't need to select moisture source. Yeah. And then as far as moisture lag, currently it defaults to 0, flow sensor to 14. Generally, these are pretty good settings to go off of, would be the feedback I get from customers. But in the case that we're starting to see some yield data that may be off, there is an opportunity to go back and perhaps increase the lag or decrease it. And same with the moisture lag and get that to a point where we want it. So there are some opportunities here just to get that data right where we want it and make it as clean as possible.
with the flow sensor, you might see where you want to change that is situations where when you're coming up to the headlands and you're missing a snippet of data, and then on the other side, maybe you've gone over the headlands, so you have a piece of red data where it's showing up that there's no yield there, but there actually is. So that's where I would play with that flow sensor lag a little bit.
Yeah.
And adjusting GPS location, this is kind of like a nudge. So if you notice that you're off a little bit and it's just not quite lining up, and maybe you're getting a strip on one side, if you're getting a strip on both sides, it's probably your elevation in your GPS offset. You maybe have it set 25 feet too high or something like that, and it thinks that you're narrower than you actually are. So that could be it. But the adjusting the GPS locations, you're all familiar with nudging stuff over, and that's where you do it, just to find that precision and that nice crisp map. And then crop settings is basically it all has defaults in it, and they're all going to be where we want to go. But if there's for some reason you want to have your barley at 46 or 52 or 48, you can change it to whatever you want. You can switch your moisture to where you want to be for your crop settings. So
I love setting up combines, really simple. And of course, the data is super rewarding once we get into harvest here. But following a lot of these tips as we get into harvest will really set you up for success. And I always say, just make sure you give yourself a little bit of time. Sometimes we have people setting them up right when they're in the middle of harvest, and sometimes that doesn't always give us the desired results. So just making sure that we've got everything calibrated and ready to go before is always a great practice.
And another tip that I would have, because I know a lot of you keeners out there have trials or comparisons, and some of us maybe made mistakes, and we want to see what that mistake cost us because we were able to record it on FieldView. What I recommend is, put a little thought into how you're going to harvest that trial. A lot of times we'll have, let's say, a 60-foot drill and a 40-foot head. So we'll have kind of 20 feet on each side in between each treatment. That stuff I would take at the very end or take at the very beginning. And some growers will actually unplug their drive and clean that up. So then they'll just have the strips on where their comparison is. So let's say they had a variety trial with 4 varieties. They would go a strip down the middle of each, and then they would pull their drive out and then clean up the rest of the stuff, just so that data wasn't trying to transfer back and forth. If you do a yield analysis, it's going to show it in treatment A and in treatment B. So that would be one way to do it. But keep in mind, if that doesn't happen, it's not a big deal. We can still go into a yield analysis look and do by seeder pass, by sprayer pass, or by combine pass. We can still do those comparisons. So it's not the end of the world. And every year we're going to get a little bit better at doing these trials. So I hope you guys have lots of fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I mean, here's the opportunities we have as soon as that data comes in, right? We can start to really analyze all of our various different passes and fields. We can look at it by hybrid. We can even look at it by combine in here as well. But really great opportunities for looking at that data in near instant time, which is great. The other thing I'll note is the remote view function. So if we go back into equipment, you can see we can just click on remote view here. We might have somebody else who's on a different account, and we can also click here and enter their username and invite them to remote view for us as well. So a couple of opportunities for that. And I have several users that have upgraded from just a Wi-Fi only iPad to a cell plus Wi-Fi iPad because they love getting that harvest information in real time at harvest, and they can keep an eye on how things are going. So sometimes it's a matter of being at the grain elevator, and the guy in the grain elevator is watching what's going on in the combine at the same time and watching that progress, and that's really rewarding. So no doubt, lots of opportunities, and always a good thing to just think about when you're buying that next iPad as well, because of course you don't have to buy a cell plan for it until you're ready, but you do have to have the ability for a cell plan when you make that first iPad purchase.
There's a few things, a few tips that I want to make sure that we all have and things that we have ready before we get into the cab, and that's our iPads. So we're going to show you how to make sure everything is up to date. Andrew's going to go into the App Store. So that's the blue icon that looks like an A. And once he goes into the App Store, he's going to be able to pull up FieldView Cab. So if you type that in the search bar, FieldView Cab, and if it needs an update, it'll say right there. It'll say update needed, and then you would be able to go and update it. That's one place that we need to make sure that we're updated. That gets rid of any bugs that maybe we experienced last year or during spring, any minor little tweaks. It just kind of fixes glitchiness. So make sure we're doing that. The second one is to make sure that our iPad is using the most current software. So you'll find that in your iPad settings, and the iPad settings is that gray icon that looks like gears turning, and you go into general, and then you can go into about software update, and then there it'll let you know what you're running and if there is a software update that's needed. So make sure that we're using the most current software and that we're also using the most current apps.
Then one of the nice features on Cab app is when you go to help, you can actually check out version info. So we saw that I was on the most recent version, which is 10.2.1. It also gives you a few release notes. So you're able to know what might have been addressed or what new compatibility would have been introduced. And there is a new one that will be coming out here shortly. So please do make sure all of your iPads are up to date, all on the same version. And that will just overall help ensure that you're on the best experience possible. The other thing I want to encourage everybody to do is just make sure that all your data is cleaned up before getting into the season here of harvest, because cleaning field boundaries and having other data uploaded is always an important part of understanding the whole story at harvest, as we talked about earlier. And so there's many staff at FieldView that are able to help you support you in that. And so, if you do need help, please do call our support line or your local contact, and we'll be sure to help you in getting that data in. The other thing is actually around cloud syncing. So cloud syncing is a really important aspect of FieldView. It's one of our major strengths, ensuring that we've got going to the cloud and can be used across platforms. And so the cloud sync button on the homepage, lower left corner here, and often what you'll find is that when you come into a connection, it will automatically cloud sync, but it's always good to double check that. And so I just want to encourage you to make sure that you're cloud syncing every night if possible during the harvest season. If it doesn't happen quite that frequently, no problems, but always good to do it with some regularity and making sure that that data is safely stored and can be leveraged across platforms for your whole business to be able to have the same visualization of all that data. So there's just one more tip for you as we go into harvest here. And then as we go into harvest as well, we know that the demands for support are greater. So there will be extended hours as well. So just an important consideration that typically our hours are 7 to 7 Central Time during the harvest season. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And, we want to make sure that we can keep everybody running and answer any of those questions as we go.
You bet. Another tip that we always recommend is making sure that those yield monitors are clean and that they're calibrated as close as possible. And when we are doing trials, that we're using Combine A to do all of the treatments that we have, just to get that good representation. So if the combine is out a little bit on yield, we're not too concerned about it. It'll all be relevant to the rest of the trial.
That's right. And finally, there is a blog with Climate FieldView. If you go to climatefieldview.ca, you'll see on the top menu Climate FieldView blog. There's some tips there for pre-harvest checklist as well. So feel free to go there for a quick reference if you're looking to uncover some of this information we've gone through here today. And of course, all webinars are hosted at climatefieldview.ca/webinars. If you need to go back and reference any of the information there. So want to thank you for the time you took here today with us. We really appreciate it and wish you an abundantly successful season. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.